I went from being a broke nurse to the miracle healer for a ruthless mafia boss's dying daughter overnight, but I never expected to fall for the dangerous man who'd kill to protect her. What happens when your gift becomes both your prison and your pathway to an impossible love? I was drowning in debt when I took the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. 3 years of working in the emergency room had turned me into a machine, checking patients, writing notes, and moving on to the next person. My tiny apartment was cold and empty. My friends were gone. And my only friend was Mrs. Kapoor, who ran the store where I bought my coffee at midnight. "You have a gift, Ellie," she told me whenever I wrapped her sore hands with the care I saved for my patients. A healing touch. I laughed it off. My gift hadn't saved my mom from cancer, hadn't kept my brother from using drugs again, hadn't stopped me from being alone at 27, with nothing but loans and tiredness to show for it. Every night was the same. Check heartbeats, ask about pain, move along. Until the night everything changed. I watched the clock tick past midnight, rubbing my eyes as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of cleaning products mixed with the metallic scent of blood from a car crash victim in bed 3. My feet ached in my white shoes, and my back hurt from standing for 8 hours straight. "Just 4 more hours," I whispered to myself, sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The automatic doors slid open with a whoosh, letting in a blast of cold air. A tall man in a black suit carried a small girl in his arms. 4 men with hard faces followed him, their eyes scanning the room like they were looking for danger. "Please," the man said, his voice thick with an accent I couldn't place. "My daughter needs help." I stood up from behind the desk, noticing the shine of his leather shoes against the dirty linoleum floor. "Sir, I'll need you to fill out—" "No time," he cut me off, his voice sharp but filled with fear. "She's been to 5 hospitals. No one can help her." The little girl in his arms looked so pale, her skin almost blue in the harsh lights. Her eyelids fluttered as she fought against pain I could see in the tight lines around her small mouth. I should have called the doctor, should have followed the rules. But something in the man's eyes, a mix of power and complete helplessness, made me reach for the girl instead. "I'll check her vitals," I said, leading them to an empty bed. As my fingers touched her wrist to find her pulse, a strange warmth spread through my hand. The girl's eyes opened, meeting mine. "The hurt is going away," she whispered. The man stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and something else. Hope. Maybe, or suspicion. I pulled my hand back, confused. What had just happened? Little did I know that this moment would drag me into a world of danger and power I never imagined. That this man with his expensive suit and desperate eyes would turn my simple life upside down. That my touch, which had never seemed special before, would become both my greatest strength and my biggest threat. 3 days passed after that strange night in the emergency room. I tried to forget the girl and the feeling of warmth that had spread from my fingers into her tiny body. I tried to forget the look in her father's eyes, like I had given him something precious he thought was lost forever. I kept my head down during my shifts, jumping at every sound when the automatic doors opened. The memory of the 4 men with hard faces who had stood behind the father made my skin prickle with goosebumps. Something told me they weren't bodyguards for a normal businessman. On the 3rd night, rain pattered against the windows of the emergency room. The clock read 3:15 a.m., and the only sounds were the beeping of machines and the soft snores of an old man waiting for his wife to get stitches. I was filling out paperwork when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The coffee I had been sipping splashed onto my scrubs as I stared at the screen. There he was, the man from the other night. His name was Viktor Sokolov, and the article called him a suspected crime boss under investigation. The picture showed him leaving a courthouse, his face hard as stone, nothing like the desperate father I had met. My hands shook as I set down my phone. I had touched the daughter of a man who might be a murderer, a thief, a monster. And somehow I had helped her when fancy doctors with fancy degrees could not. I pulled my coat tight around me when my shift ended at 7 a.m., glancing over my shoulder as I walked to the bus stop. The streets were waking up, shop owners sweeping their steps, early workers hurrying past with travel mugs of coffee, birds singing in the trees that lined the road. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. My tiny apartment welcomed me with its familiar smells, old books, the lavender candle I always burn to cover up the musty carpet, leftover Thai food in the fridge. I locked the door, slid the chain into place, and fell face first onto my bed without even taking off my shoes. When I woke up, the sun was setting. Orange light filtered through my thin curtains, making patterns on the wall. For a moment, I forgot about Viktor Sokolov and his daughter. Then my phone rang. "Hello?" I answered, my voice thick with sleep. "Ellie Parker?" a deep voice asked. Not Victor's voice, but one that sent a chill down my spine anyway. "Who is this?" "Mr. Sokolov would like to speak with you. There's a car waiting outside." I rushed to the window and peeked through the curtains. A black car with tinted windows sat at the curb. A tall man in a dark suit stood beside it, phone to his ear. Our eyes met, and he gave a small nod. "I'm calling the police," I said, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "That would be unwise," the voice replied calmly. "Mr. Sokolov simply wants to thank you for helping his daughter. He's prepared to be very generous." I thought of my student loans, $137,000 that kept me awake at night. I thought of my brother in his third rehab center, the one I could barely afford. I thought of my mother, who had died because we couldn't pay for the treatment she needed. "I'll be down in 5 minutes," I said, and hung up. The car was warm inside, with soft leather seats and that new car smell. The driver didn't speak as we pulled away from my apartment building. The streets of the city blurred by. Bright shop windows, people walking dogs, couples holding hands. Normal life going on while mine took a sharp turn into the unknown. We stopped at a tall iron gate that opened slowly after the driver pressed a button. The car crunched up a gravel driveway lined with perfectly trimmed bushes. At the end sat a house that looked like it belonged in a movie, all stone and glass with lights glowing from within. My mouth went dry as the car stopped at the front door. What was I doing here? This man was dangerous. I should run, scream, fight, do anything but walk into his home. But then the door opened, and there she was, the little girl from the hospital. Her pale face now had rosy cheeks, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at me. "It's the angel," she said, smiling wide enough to show a missing tooth. "Papa, it's the angel who took away my pain." Viktor Sokolov appeared behind her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. He wore a simple black sweater and pants that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Up close, without the worry lines from the hospital, I could see he was handsome in a dangerous way, like a beautiful wild animal you know better than to touch. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice softer than I expected. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." I followed them into a room with ceilings so high I had to tilt my head back to see them. A fire crackled in a fireplace big enough to stand in. Paintings that looked old and important hung on the walls. Everything smelled like lemon polish and expensive cologne. "Sophia hasn't had a fever since you touched her," Victor said, watching as his daughter twirled around the room in a blue dress. 3 years of suffering, gone in a moment. "I didn't do anything special," I said, my voice small in the big room. "I just checked her pulse." Victor's eyes, gray like storm clouds, studied me. "We both know that's not true." A woman in a black dress brought tea on a silver tray. The cups were so thin I could see the light through them when I lifted mine with shaking hands. I've had doctors from all over the world, Victor continued. I've spent $2 million trying to find a cure. Nothing worked until you. I nearly choked on my tea. $2 million? That was more money than I would make in 20 years of nursing. What do you want from me? I asked, setting down the delicate cup before I could drop it. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I want to understand what you did, and I want you to do it again. Sophia is better. But the doctors say the illness could come back. I told you I didn't do anything special. Then why did I have my men check your background? Victor asked, his voice suddenly hard. Why do I know about your mother who died of cancer? Your brother in rehab? The loans that keep you working double shifts? My blood turned to ice. You investigated me? I investigate everyone who comes into my life. He stood and walked to the window, his back to me. Especially those who seem too good to be true. Sophia had fallen asleep on a velvet couch, her chest rising and falling with easy breaths. She looked so peaceful, so normal, not like a child who had been sick for most of her life. What if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Victor turned, and for a moment I saw something flash across his face. Not anger, but fear. Then we have nothing more to discuss. You'll be driven home, and we'll never contact you again. It should have been an easy choice. Go home. Forget this man and his daughter and his millions of dollars. Go back to my safe, small life. But as I looked at Sophia's sleeping face, I thought of all the children I had seen suffer in the hospital, all the ones I couldn't help. What if I really did have some kind of gift? What if I could make a difference? I want to help, I heard myself say, but I have conditions. And just like that, I stepped over a line I could never uncross. The black car appeared outside the hospital at the end of my shift the next night, just as Victor had promised. My heart beat faster when I saw it waiting there, sleek and dark against the curb like a shark in shallow water. I clutched my bag tighter as I walked toward it, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. The back door opened as I approached. I expected to see Victor inside, but instead, a different man sat there. One of the hard-faced men from the emergency room. He wore a black suit and had a tiny scar that cut through his right eyebrow. Mr. Sokolov is waiting, he said in a flat voice. Please get in. I hesitated for 3 heartbeats, then slid into the car. The leather seats were cold against my legs despite the warm spring night. The car smelled like pine air freshener and something metallic that made me think of the emergency room. I'm Anton, the man said as the car pulled away from the curb. He didn't offer his hand to shake. Security for Mr. Sokolov and his daughter. Are they in danger? I asked, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood slide by outside the window. Anton's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Everyone in Mr. Sokolov's world is in danger, Miss Parker. That's why people like me exist. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. What was I getting myself into? I could still ask to be taken home. I could walk away from Victor Sokolov and his sick daughter and his dangerous world. But then I thought of Sophia's face when the pain left her body. I thought of the warmth that had flowed from my hands into hers. I thought of my own bank account with just $342 in it, and the pile of bills waiting on my kitchen counter. We drove for 30 minutes, leaving the crowded city behind and entering an area with big houses set far back from the road. Trees lined the streets here, their new spring leaves rustling in the evening breeze. Finally, we turned onto a private road that wound through tall iron gates, with cameras perched on top like watching birds. Victor's house looked even bigger in the growing darkness. Lights shone from every window, making it glow like something from a fairy tale. But this was no fairy tale, I reminded myself. This was the home of a man who might have hurt people, who might have broken laws I didn't even want to think about. Anton led me through a side door and down a hallway with floors so shiny I could see my reflection in them. The walls were covered in paintings of serious-looking people and landscapes with stormy skies. Our footsteps echoed as we walked, mine quick and nervous, his slow and sure. We found Victor in what he called his study, a room with more books than I had ever seen outside a library. They lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines in different colors that made patterns like a quilt. A fire crackled in a fireplace, sending shadows dancing across the room. Victor stood when we entered, closing the book he had been reading. He wore a simple gray sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in, but I knew it probably cost more than my rent. "Miss Parker," he said with a small nod. "Thank you for coming." "You didn't give me much choice," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "There's always a choice. You made yours when you agreed to my terms." My terms had been simple. I would visit Sophia twice a week, but I would keep my job at the hospital. No one could know about our arrangement, and I wanted enough money to pay off my student loans and my brother's rehab. Not a penny more. "Where's Sophia?" I asked, looking around the big room. "In the garden with her tutor. She's been well enough for lessons this week." Pride softened Victor's face when he spoke of his daughter. "She'll join us for dinner." Dinner. The word hung in the air between us. Somehow I hadn't expected to share a meal with him, to sit across a table and pass the salt and pretend we were normal people who had met in a normal way. "I'm not dressed for dinner," I said, looking down at my wrinkled scrubs and scuffed white shoes. Victor waved his hand as if swatting away a fly. "Sophia won't mind, and neither do I. But if you prefer, there are clothes in the guest room upstairs. My housekeeper guessed your size." The thought of him having clothes ready for me sent a chill down my spine. How long had he been planning this? How much did he know about me? Anton showed me to a room bigger than my whole apartment. The bed was covered in a white, puffy blanket that looked like a cloud. The bathroom had a tub big enough to swim in, and in the closet hung dresses, pants, sweaters, all with tags still attached. I changed into a simple blue dress, running my fingers over the soft fabric. The tag said it cost $450. I could have worked 3 extra shifts at the hospital and still not been able to afford it. When I came back downstairs, the sun had set completely. The house felt different in the darkness, bigger, older, full of secrets hiding in the shadows. I found my way back to the study by following the sound of voices. Sophia sat on a couch near the fire, a book open on her lap. Her hair had been brushed until it shone like gold in the firelight. She looked up when I entered, her face breaking into a smile that made her whole body seem to glow. "You came back," she said, jumping up and running to me. Her small arms wrapped around my waist, her head barely reaching my chest. "I promised I would," I said, awkwardly patting her back. I wasn't used to children being happy to see me. In the hospital, they usually cried when I approached, knowing I might bring needles or bad news. "Will you make the pain stay away forever?" Sophia asked, looking up at me with big eyes the same gray as her father's. I glanced at Victor, who watched us with an expression I couldn't read. "I'll try," I said, though I had no idea if I could keep that promise. Dinner was served in a room with a table long enough to seat 20 people. The 3 of us sat at one end, with Anton standing by the door like a statue. The food came on plates with gold edges carried by a woman who never smiled or spoke. Sophia chatted happily about her lessons and her cat, and the birds she had seen in the garden. Victor listened with his full attention, as if every word she said was important. I pushed food around my plate and tried to ignore the knot of fear in my stomach. "After dinner, I want you to check Sophia again," Victor said when there was a pause in his daughter's stories. "To make sure she's still well." I nodded, taking a sip of water from a glass that felt too delicate in my clumsy hands. What exactly was wrong with her? Before, I mean. A shadow crossed Victor's face. The doctors called it many things: autoimmune disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome. Some suggested it was psychological, that she was making herself sick because her mother died. And what do you think it was? I asked. Victor's eyes met mine across the table. I think it was a curse, and I think you lifted it. I nearly choked on my water. A curse? Like magic? My wife's family is from an old village in Russia. They believed in such things. He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. When Sophia got sick right after Anya died, her grandmother said we were being punished. Punished for what? I asked before I could stop myself. Victor's face hardened. For the choices I've made, the life I've built. A heavy silence fell over the table. Even Sophia stopped eating, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. Papa builds buildings, she said after a moment, her voice small in the big room. And sometimes people get mad and try to hurt us. I looked from her innocent face to Victor's guarded one. The contrast made my head spin. This man might be a criminal, might have hurt people, might be everything the news article said he was. But he was also a father who loved his daughter enough to believe in curses and miracles. After dinner, I followed Sophia to her bedroom, a princess room with a canopy bed and stuffed animals lined up on shelves. She sat on the edge of her bed in her nightgown, swinging her legs back and forth. "Will you check my special spots?" she asked, pointing to her neck and wrists. I gently pressed my fingers to the lymph nodes under her jaw, then to her pulse points. The same warmth spread through my fingers. But softer this time, like an echo of what had happened in the hospital. "Everything feels normal," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was feeling for. Magic? A curse? Sophia yawned, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Mama used to say that some people have healing hands. I think you're one of them." I tucked her into bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals. As I turned to leave, she caught my hand. "Will you come back?" she asked in a small voice. "Twice a week," I promised. "Just like I agreed with your father." She smiled and closed her eyes. By the time I reached the door, she was already asleep. Victor waited in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "Well?" he asked. "She seems perfectly healthy," I said. "But I'm not a doctor, Victor. I'm just a nurse." "You're more than that," he said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." As the black car drove me home that night, I watched the big houses give way to apartment buildings and streetlights. I felt like I was traveling between two worlds. Victor's world of wealth and danger and possible magic, and my own world of hospital shifts and instant noodles and normal problems. I didn't belong in either one anymore. 2 weeks passed in a strange new pattern. Monday and Thursday nights, the black car waited for me after my hospital shift. Anton never smiled, never spoke beyond basic greetings, but he was always there, as regular as the moon. I would spend those evenings at Victor's mansion, checking Sophia's health, playing board games with her, sometimes reading her stories until she fell asleep. At first, I jumped at every sound in that big house. The creak of floorboards made me think of footsteps sneaking up behind me. The low voices of Victor's men in hallways made my skin prickle with fear. I kept my guard up, waiting for the moment when the mask would slip, when Victor would show his true colors. But as days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. I began to look forward to those visits. To Sophia's excited face when I arrived, to the quiet moments in Victor's garden as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that made me wish I could paint. Tonight, I sat on a stone bench among roses that smelled sweet in the warm evening air. Sophia had gone to bed early, tired from a day of playing in the sunshine. Her cheeks had been pink with health when I tucked her in, so different from the pale, sick child I had met in the emergency room. She seems completely cured, I said as Victor joined me, carrying 2 glasses of something amber-colored that caught the fading light. Thanks to you, he said, handing me one of the glasses. The drink burned my throat but left warmth in my chest. I still don't understand what I did, I admitted, watching a bee buzz lazily from flower to flower. Or if I did anything at all. Victor sat beside me, leaving exactly 12 inches of space between us. I had noticed he was always careful about that, keeping a proper distance, never crowding me, never making me feel trapped, despite the fact that his men watched the house day and night. Does it matter? He asked. Sophia is well. That's all I care about. I turned to look at him. Really look at him for perhaps the first time. The setting sun cast half his face in golden light, half in shadow. A perfect picture of the 2 sides of this man, the loving father and the dangerous criminal. Which one was real? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Tell me about your library, I said, changing the subject. I've never seen so many books outside of a public library. A small smile lifted the corner of his mouth. My father was a professor before we left Russia. He taught literature at Moscow University. Books were his passion, then mine. What do you like to read? I asked, genuinely curious. I couldn't picture this hard man losing himself in a story the way I did on my rare days off. Poetry? He said, surprising me. Pushkin, Akhmatova. And you? Cheap murder mysteries, I admitted with a laugh, the kind where the good guys always win in the end. Victor's smile faded. Life is rarely so simple. No, I agreed, thinking of my mother's slow death, my brother's battle with drugs, my own struggle to stay afloat. It's not. We sat in silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I felt strangely peaceful, which made no sense. I should be terrified sitting next to this man who the news called a criminal. Instead, I found myself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar near his right eye. What happened there? I asked before I could stop myself pointing to the scar. Victor touched it lightly as if he had forgotten it was there. A reminder to be careful who you trust. And who do you trust, Victor Sokolov? His eyes met mine, serious and searching. Very few people, Ellie Parker. But I'm beginning to trust you. The way he said my name sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. I looked away quickly, confused by my own reaction. The next day at the hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the garden, about the way Victor had looked at me, the way my name had sounded in his deep voice. I was so distracted that I nearly gave the wrong medicine to a patient. Earth to Ellie, said Maria, another nurse who had worked the night shift with me for years. Where have you been lately? Hot date? I forced a laugh. Just tired, picking up extra shifts to pay off loans. But I hadn't picked up extra shifts in weeks. In fact, I had cut back my hours at the hospital. Victor's payments had cleared my student loans in one swoop. My brother's rehab was paid through the end of the year. For the first time since my mother died, I wasn't drowning in debt. That night wasn't a night I was supposed to visit Sophia. But I found myself thinking about her as I walked home from the bus stop, about the way she laughed when I pushed her on the swing in Victor's garden, about her serious face when she showed me her drawings. My apartment felt smaller than ever when I unlocked the door. The walls seemed to press in on me, the ceiling too low. I had lived here for 5 years, but suddenly it felt like a stranger's home, empty, lonely. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Car outside if you want to come over. Victor. I peered through my curtains and sure enough, the black car waited at the curb. I should say no. I had just worked a 12-hour shift. I was tired, dirty, hungry. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Victor's garden again, freshly showered in one of the guest bathrooms, wearing clothes that had mysteriously appeared in my room. Clothes that fit perfectly. "Sophia missed you today," Victor said as he poured tea from a silver pot. "She asked when her angel was coming back." "I'm no angel," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "No?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "What are you then?" "Just a tired nurse who somehow got mixed up with a man the news calls a mob boss." I expected him to deny it, to offer excuses or explanations. Instead, he shrugged. "The news doesn't know everything about me." "Then tell me," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Tell me something the news doesn't know." Victor set down his cup and leaned back in his chair. For a moment I thought he would refuse. Then he began to speak in a low voice that made me lean closer to hear. "I was born in a small village outside Moscow. My father was brilliant but poor. My mother cleaned houses for the local officials to put food on our table. When I was 10, men came to our house in the night. They said my father had spoken against the government. They took him away." Victor's eyes grew distant. We never saw him again. My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. "I'm sorry." "My mother and I came to America when I was 15. She cleaned houses here too, but she got sick. Cancer. Like your mother." He met my eyes. "We had no money, no insurance. She died in a charity hospital while I held her hand." I thought of my own mother, of the way her fingers had grown so thin I could see every bone as I held them. "How did you go from that to—" I gestured around us at the mansion, the garden, the unseen men who guarded the property. "I made choices," he said simply, "not always good ones. But I survived. And when I met Anya, I wanted to give her everything my mother never had. Then Sophia came, and I wanted to give her the world." "At what cost?" I asked softly. Victor's face hardened. "Any cost?" I should have been frightened by that answer. Instead, I found myself nodding. Hadn't I thought the same thing about my own family? Wouldn't I have done anything to save my mother? To help my brother? The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Victor was on his feet instantly, pushing me behind him. Anton appeared as if from nowhere, gun in hand. "Sir, there's been a breach at the east fence," he said in a tense voice. "Security is handling it." Victor turned to me, his face suddenly the face of a stranger. Cold, hard, dangerous. "Go with Anton. He'll take you to the safe room with Sophia." "But—" "Now, Ellie," he said, and there was no room for argument in his voice. Anton led me through the house at a run, upstairs and down hallways I had never seen before. We found Sophia in her bedroom, eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" she asked as Anton checked the windows. "Just a drill," I lied, sitting beside her on the bed and taking her small hand in mine. "Your dad wants us to practice going to the safe room." The safe room was behind a bookshelf in Sophia's closet. It was small but comfortable, with bunk beds, a mini fridge, and a tiny bathroom. Anton locked us inside, then spoke into a radio clipped to his jacket. "Package secure," he said, and I realized with a jolt that package meant Sophia and me. We sat on one of the beds, a children's book open between us, though neither of us was reading it. I could feel Sophia's heart beating too fast where her body pressed against mine. "Are you scared?" she whispered. "Yes," I thought. Terrified, but not of what was happening outside, of what was happening inside me, of the way my heart had jumped when Victor touched my arm, of how badly I wanted to run to him now instead of hiding here. "No," I lied again, smoothing her hair. "Your dad will keep us safe." After an hour that felt like a year, the door to the safe room opened. Victor stood there, a cut on his forehead sending a thin line of blood down his temple. "It's over," he said, his voice tired. "False alarm." but the look in his eyes told me it was anything but false. As Sophia ran to hug him, he looked at me over her head. In that look, I saw everything he hadn't told me. The danger, the violence, the cost of his choices. And I knew, with a clarity that stole my breath, that I was falling for a man who lived in a world where safe rooms and guns and fear were normal. A man who might hurt people, but who held his daughter as if she were made of glass. A man who was becoming less of a monster and more of a mystery with every moment I spent with him. "You're bleeding," I said, stepping forward to touch the cut on his head. And as my fingers brushed his skin, I felt that same warmth flow from me to him. His eyes widened as the small wound closed beneath my touch. "What are you?" he whispered. I shook my head, as lost for answers as he was. "I don't know, but I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The summer heat pressed down on the city like a heavy blanket. I wiped sweat from my forehead as I hurried into the hospital for my shift, my scrubs already sticking to my skin despite the early hour. 3 months had passed since that night in Victor's safe room, since the moment I had healed the cut on his head with just a touch. 3 months of questions without answers, of trying to understand what was happening to me. My life had split into 2 worlds that felt miles apart. In one, I was still Ellie Parker, night shift nurse who ate ramen noodles and worried about paying rent. In the other, I was someone else, a woman who wore expensive dresses and sat in a garden with a man everyone feared but me. "You're late again," said Dr. Wilson, the night supervisor, as I rushed to the nurse's station. His thin lips pressed together in a line as straight as the part in his gray hair. "That's the 3rd time this month." "I'm sorry," I said, shoving my bag into a locker. "The bus was late." Dr. Wilson's eyes narrowed. "You've been different lately, Ellie. Distracted. And I've heard rumors." My heart beat faster like a trapped bird in my chest. "Rumors?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "About you and Viktor Sokolov." The name hung in the air between us like smoke. I tried to keep my face blank, but heat rushed to my cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "One of the EMTs saw you getting into a black car outside the hospital. He recognized Sokolov's driver." Dr. Wilson shook his head. "Do you know who that man is, Ellie? What he does?" I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had healed Sophia, that had closed the cut on Victor's head without leaving a scar. "He's a businessman." Dr. Wilson's laugh was short and bitter, like biting into something rotten. "Is that what he told you? That man is dangerous. His business has put people in our emergency room. Some never made it out alive." My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I had avoided thinking about this part of Victor's life, had pushed away the news stories and the whispers. It was easier to see only the man who read poetry in his garden, who looked at his daughter like she was the sun and moon and stars all wrapped into one small body. "I'm just helping with his daughter," I said, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. "She was sick." "Then send her to a real doctor." Dr. Wilson's voice hardened. "This hospital has a code of ethics, Ellie. We don't associate with criminals. I've looked the other way until now because you're a good nurse. But this stops today, or you find somewhere else to work." He walked away, leaving me frozen in place. The noise of the emergency room faded to a distant hum as I tried to breathe through the panic rising in my chest like floodwater. I couldn't lose my job. Despite Victor's payments, I still needed my own money, my own life. I couldn't let myself become completely dependent on him, but I couldn't stop seeing Sophia either. Or Victor. The thought of never sitting in that garden again, of never seeing his rare smile when I made him laugh, made my chest ache in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. My shift dragged on like a bad dream. I checked vitals, gave medicines, filled out charts, all while Dr. Wilson watched me with suspicious eyes. When morning came at last, I changed out of my scrubs with shaking hands. I half expected to find the black car waiting outside, but the street was empty except for the usual morning traffic and people hurrying to work. I had told Victor I needed space, needed one night to just be Ellie the nurse instead of whatever I was becoming in his world. He had agreed, his face carefully blank, but I had seen the flash of something like hurt in his eyes before he turned away. The bus was crowded and smelled of too many bodies in too small a space. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the city wake up around me. When I finally reached my apartment building, all I wanted was a shower and sleep. Then I saw them, 2 men in dark suits standing by my door. Not Victor's men. These men had hard eyes and stood too stiffly, like soldiers waiting for orders. I froze on the sidewalk, my keys clutched in my hand like a weapon. One of the men noticed me and nudged his partner. They both turned to look at me, and something in their eyes made my blood run cold. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard shouts and the sound of feet pounding on concrete. I darted into the alley beside my building, heart hammering against my ribs. My phone was in my hand before I realized I had reached for it, my finger finding Victor's number without having to look. "Ellie?" His voice was alert despite the early hour. "What's wrong?" "There are men at my apartment," I gasped, pressing myself against the brick wall of the alley. "Not your men. They're chasing me." "Where are you exactly?" The sleepiness vanished from Victor's voice, replaced by a hardness I had rarely heard. I gave him the cross streets, peering around the corner to see if the men had followed me. The street looked empty, but that didn't mean they weren't searching for me. "Stay hidden," Victor ordered. "I'm sending Anton right now. He's 3 minutes away." "Who are they?" I asked, my voice small with fear. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Probably Lebedev's men." "Who is Lebedev?" Another pause, longer this time. "A rival. Someone who would use anything against me, including you." The word rival hung in the air like a neon sign. Not business rival. Something darker. Something that explained the guns, the security, the safe room. Something I had been trying not to see. "Victor," I whispered. "What have you gotten me into?" "I'll explain everything," he promised. "Just stay safe until Anton gets there." The line went dead. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible behind a dumpster that smelled of rotting food. 2 minutes crawled by like 2 years. Every sound made me jump. A car backfiring, a dog barking, a door slamming. Then I heard voices at the mouth of the alley, men's voices speaking in a language that sounded like Russian. My heart stopped as footsteps came closer, closer. A shoe appeared beside the dumpster, then a leg, then a man peering down at me with cold eyes. "Come with us," he said in heavily accented English, reaching for my arm. "Mr. Lebedev wants to talk." "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said, trying to sound brave though my voice shook like leaves in a storm. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You don't have a choice." A screech of tires cut through the morning air. A black SUV skidded to a stop at the alley entrance. Anton leaped out, gun in hand, another of Victor's men right behind him. Everything happened so fast after that. Shouts in Russian, the crack of gunshots. Me, pressed against the wall, hands over my ears, eyes squeezed shut. Then Anton's hand on my arm, pulling me toward the SUV. "Are you hurt?" he asked as he pushed me into the back seat. I shook my head, too shocked to speak. Through the window, I saw one of the men who had chased me lying on the ground, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. The other man was nowhere to be seen. "Did you?" I couldn't finish the question. Anton didn't answer. He just climbed into the driver's seat and sped away, tires screaming against the pavement. We drove in silence through the waking city, Buildings and people blurred past as my mind raced. Someone had died in that alley. Because of me. Because I had somehow become important to Viktor Sokolov. Viktor was waiting at the mansion, pacing the entrance hall like a caged animal. When he saw me, his face flooded with relief. He stepped toward me, arms outstretched, then stopped when he saw my expression. "You're safe," he said, his voice gentle as if talking to a frightened child. "That's all that matters." "All that matters?" My voice rose, sharp with anger and fear. "A man is dead in an alley because of you, because of whatever you've dragged me into." Viktor's face hardened. "That man would have taken you to Lebedev, and you would have wished for death before he was done with you." "Why? What does he want with me?" "Not you." Viktor ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. "Me. Lebedev has been trying to take over my territory for years. Now he's heard rumors about you, about what you can do. He thinks he can use you against me." "Your territory?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "So it's true. You really are some kind of criminal." Viktor's eyes met mine, steady and unblinking. "I am many things, Ellie. Some of them you wouldn't like. But everything I've done to protect what's mine." "And am I yours now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is that why those men came for me? Is that why Dr. Wilson is threatening to fire me?" Surprise flashed across Viktor's face. "What did Wilson say?" "That I have to choose. My job or whatever this is." I gestured between us, at the mansion around us, at the life I had stumbled into. Viktor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but firm. "I won't make that choice for you. If you want to walk away, I'll make sure you're safe. I'll make sure Lebedev never finds you." "And Sophia?" I asked, thinking of the little girl who called me her angel. Pain crossed Viktor's face. "She would miss you, but she would understand." Would she? Would I? The thought of never seeing Sophia again, of never sitting in the garden with Viktor as the sun set, made my chest ache. But could I really give up my normal life, my job, everything I had worked for? "I need time," I said, wrapping my arms around myself. "I need to think." Viktor nodded, his face carefully blank. "Of course. You can stay here until it's safe. Use the time to decide what you want, Ellie." What I wanted. Such a simple phrase for such an impossible choice. As I walked up the grand staircase to the room that had somehow become mine, I realized with perfect clarity that whatever I chose, my life would never be the same again. The world I had known, safe, simple, ordinary, was gone forever. And the man watching me go, with eyes that held both danger and something that looked dangerously like love, was the reason why. I stayed at Viktor's mansion for 3 days, hiding from Lebedev's men and from the choice I needed to make. Sophia was happy to have me there, following me around like a small shadow, showing me her toys and books and secret hiding places. She didn't ask why I wasn't going to work, or why men with guns now stood at every door and window. Children adapt quickly to the strangest situations, I thought. Maybe I could too. On the 4th morning, I woke early and wandered down to the kitchen. The big house was quiet except for the soft footsteps of security men making their rounds. Through the window, I could see the garden where roses bloomed in the soft pink light of dawn. My garden now, in a way. The place where I had first begun to see Viktor as more than just a dangerous man. "You're up early," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Viktor in the doorway, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt that showed the muscles in his arms. It was strange to see him like this. Not in his usual perfect suits, but looking almost normal. Almost like someone I could have met in a coffee shop or at the hospital. Someone whose life didn't involve guns and rivals and men dying in alleys. "Couldn't sleep," I said, pouring coffee into a mug that probably cost more than all the dishes in my apartment combined. Too much thinking? Victor nodded, pouring his own coffee. His movements were careful, controlled, like everything about him. And have your thoughts led you to a decision? I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, feeling the smooth, expensive ceramic against my skin. Everything in Victor's world was like that. Beautiful, costly, perfect on the outside. But underneath... I called the hospital yesterday, I said. Told them I quit. Victor's eyebrows rose slightly, the only sign of surprise he allowed himself to show. I see. Don't read too much into it, I warned, looking out the window rather than at him. I need time to figure this out. Whatever this is. I waved my hand vaguely between us. And what do you think this is? Ellie, Victor asked, his voice so soft I had to strain to hear it. What was it? A job taking care of Sophia? A strange friendship with a man who lived in a world completely different from mine? Or something more dangerous? Feelings I wasn't ready to name growing like weeds in the cracks of my carefully built walls? Before I could answer, Victor's phone rang. His face changed as he looked at the screen, hardening into the mask he wore for business. He answered with a short word in Russian, listened for exactly 37 seconds, then hung up without saying goodbye. What's wrong? I asked, setting down my coffee. Nothing for you to worry about, he said, but his eyes said differently. Don't do that, I said, anger flaring suddenly in my chest. Don't treat me like I'm just some nurse you hired to take care of your daughter. Not after everything that's happened. Victor studied me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. Lebedev has been asking questions at the hospital, looking for information about you. Cold fear trickled down my spine like ice water. What kind of information? Where you live? Who your family is? Victor's voice was flat, emotionless, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Your brother, Ellie. They know about your brother. My brother, Mark. In his 6th rehab center, finally making progress after years of addiction. Mark, who was the only family I had left in the world. Is he in danger? I asked, my voice tight with fear. I've sent men to watch the facility. He's safe for now. Victor stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that reminded me of forests and rain. But this is what my world is, Ellie. This is what happens to people who get close to me. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of Mark in danger because of me, because of whatever was happening between Victor and me, because of whatever strange power lived in my hands that had healed his daughter. I should never have dragged you into this. Victor continued, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. I was selfish. I saw what you could do for Sophia, and I wanted it. I didn't think about what it would cost you. I opened my eyes to find him watching me, his face open and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. This was not Victor the businessman or Victor the feared crime boss. This was just a man, worried about the people he cared for. You didn't drag me into anything, I said quietly. I chose to help Sophia. I chose to keep coming back here. Why? He asked, the question hanging between us like a challenge. Why indeed? For the money at first, sure. For the chance to pay off my debts and help my brother. But that wasn't why I had kept coming back, why I had looked forward to those evenings in the garden, why I had quit my job rather than stop seeing him. Because when I'm here, I said slowly, trying to find words for feelings I barely understood myself. When I'm with you and Sophia, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like I've found something I didn't know I was looking for. Victor took another step closer. Now just 6 inches separated us, 6 inches of space filled with all the reasons this was a bad idea. He was dangerous. His world was violent, People around him got hurt. "And what happens when my world destroys yours?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens when you can't go back to being Ellie the nurse because Ellie the nurse doesn't exist anymore?" That was the real question, wasn't it? The one I had been avoiding since that night in the alley. My old life was gone. Dr. Wilson's ultimatum, Lebedev's men, my strange healing power. They had all made sure of that. I couldn't go back to my tiny apartment and my hospital shifts and my lonely meals in front of the TV. That Ellie was gone, replaced by someone new, someone I didn't fully recognize yet. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know who I am anymore, Victor. I don't know where I fit." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or understanding. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His touch was gentle, at odds with the strength I knew he possessed. "You fit here," he said simply. "With us." Before I could answer, the sound of running feet broke the moment. Sophia burst into the kitchen in pink pajamas, her hair a tangled mess from sleep. "Ellie, Papa!" she cried, throwing her arms around my waist. "I dreamed the bad men came back. But you chased them away." I looked down at her small face, flushed from sleep and bad dreams, and felt my heart twist with love for this child who wasn't mine. I smoothed her hair, feeling that now familiar warmth flow from my fingers, chasing away not just tangled hair but the remnants of her nightmare. "No bad men will hurt you," I promised. "Your papa and I won't let them." Over her head, my eyes met Victor's. Something passed between us, an understanding, a promise, a question still unanswered. I had quit my job, had chosen to stay in his world for now. But for how long, and at what cost? The answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously, still jumpy from the incident in the alley. "Ellie Parker?" asked a woman's voice I had never heard before. "Yes," I said, sitting straighter in my chair. Victor, who had been reading in the same room, looked up sharply. "This is Diane Foster from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your brother Mark." My heart stuttered in my chest. "What about him? Is he okay?" There was a pause that lasted forever. "He's been admitted to our emergency room. There was an incident at the rehabilitation facility." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What kind of incident?" "It appears someone attacked him, Ms. Parker. He's in surgery now. The doctors are doing everything they can, but you should come as soon as possible." The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. Victor was beside me instantly, his hand on my shoulder, his voice asking questions I couldn't answer. All I could see was Mark's face, my little brother who had been through so much already, who was finally getting better. Mark, hurt because of me. "Lebedev," Victor said, the name a curse on his lips. "He found a way past my men." Anger rose inside me, hot and fierce like a flame. "You promised he would be safe. Ellie, you promised." I stood up, pushing his hand away. "This is your fault. Your world, your enemies. Your fight that has nothing to do with me or my brother." Victor's face hardened. "You think I don't know that? You think I wanted this to happen?" "I think you live in a world where people get hurt all the time," I said, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "And I was stupid to think I could be part of it without getting hurt too." I turned away, grabbing my purse from the table. "I need to go to the hospital. My brother needs me." "I'll take you," Victor said, reaching for his keys. "No." I stepped back, away from him, away from everything he represented. "I'll call a cab. I need space from you. From all of this." Pain flashed across his face, quickly hidden behind the mask he wore so well. "At least let Anton drive you. For safety." I wanted to refuse. wanted to run away from him and his world and the danger that seemed to follow him like a shadow. But Mark was lying in a hospital bed because of Lebedev's men. I wasn't safe on my own anymore. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "But just to the hospital. After that, I need to figure this out on my own." Victor nodded once, his face carefully blank. But as I walked away, I heard him say softly, "Be careful, Ellie. My world isn't the only dangerous one anymore." I turned back confused. "What do you mean?" His eyes met mine, serious and sad. "Your gift. The healing. If Lebedev knows what you can do, others will find out too. People who will want to use you just like I did." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just running from Victor and his dangerous world. I was running from myself, from the strange power in my hands that had changed everything. And there was nowhere far enough to escape that. The hospital smelled like all hospitals, a sharp mix of cleaning products, medicine, and fear. I sat beside Mark's bed, watching his chest rise and fall with each shallow breath. His face was a mess of bruises, one eye swollen shut, his lips split in 3 places. The doctor said he had 4 broken ribs and internal bleeding that they had stopped in surgery. He was lucky to be alive. Lucky. As if there was anything lucky about being beaten half to death because your sister had somehow caught the attention of a crime boss. I held Mark's hand gently, careful not to disturb the IV line taped to his skin. His fingers felt cold and lifeless in mine. I concentrated, trying to feel that familiar warmth flow from my hands into his. But nothing happened. My strange power seemed to have disappeared, just when I needed it most. "Come on," I whispered, squeezing his hand tighter. "Heal. Please heal." Nothing. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the hiss of the oxygen flowing through the tube in his nose. A soft knock at the door made me look up. A nurse stood there, her face tired after a long shift. I recognized that look. I had worn it myself not long ago. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Says he's a friend." My heart jumped, thinking of Victor. Had he followed me here despite my asking for space? But it wasn't Victor who appeared in the doorway. It was Anton, his face as expressionless as always. "Mr. Sokolov sent me to check on you," he said, standing stiffly just inside the room. His eyes flicked to Mark on the bed, then back to me. "And to tell you that Lebedev's men have been dealt with." A chill ran down my spine at his words. I didn't want to know what "dealt with" meant in Victor's world. I didn't want to know if more men had died in some alley because of me. "Tell him thank you," I said, my voice flat with exhaustion. "But I still need time." Anton nodded once. "He understands. He also asked me to give you this." He held out a small, plain envelope. I took it, weighing it in my hand. It was light. Just a single piece of paper inside, not the thick stack of money I half expected. "What is it?" "I don't know," Anton admitted, "but he said it's important." After Anton left, I sat holding the envelope for a long time, turning it over in my hands. Part of me wanted to tear it open. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Victor's world had nearly killed my brother. What could he possibly say that would matter now? Finally, curiosity won out. I tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a letter as I had expected. It was a document. Official-looking, with stamps and signatures at the bottom. I read it slowly, my tired brain struggling to make sense of the legal language. It was a deed. To a house. In my name. The address was in a small town 3 hours north of the city, a place I had never been, had never even heard of. Along with the deed was a note in Victor's neat handwriting. "For you and Mark. When you're ready. No one knows about this place. Not even Lebedev. You'll be safe there. If you choose to go, Anton will take you. If you choose to stay, I'll be waiting. The choice is yours. Always. He had signed it simply V. I read the note 3 times, my hands shaking more with each reading. He was giving me a way out. A fresh start for me and Mark. Far from the danger of his world, but also far from him, from Sophia, from the strange new life I had been building. Mark stirred on the bed, a small moan escaping his split lips. I tucked the deed and note back into the envelope and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever decision I made could wait until my brother was better, until I knew he would be okay. For 3 days, I barely left Mark's room. I slept in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed, waking whenever a nurse came in to check his vitals. I ate from vending machines and washed in the tiny bathroom attached to his room. I tried again and again to heal him with my touch, but my power remained stubbornly dormant. On the 4th day, as the sun was setting outside the small window, Mark finally opened his eyes fully. He looked around the room in confusion before his gaze settled on me. Ellie? His voice was a raspy whisper, his throat dry from days of disuse. I'm here, I said, reaching for the cup of water beside his bed and helping him take a small sip. You're okay. You're in the hospital. His eyes clouded with memory. There were men at the rehab center. They asked about you. I swallowed hard, guilt sitting like a rock in my stomach. I know. I'm so sorry, Mark. This is all my fault. He shook his head slightly, then winced at the pain. Not your fault, but Elle. Who are you mixed up with? Those men weren't just looking to rob someone. I looked down at our joined hands, not sure how to explain. How could I tell my brother that I had somehow developed the power to heal with my touch? That I had used it to cure a crime boss's daughter? That I might be falling in love with a man whose world had nearly killed him? It's complicated, I said finally. But I'm going to fix it. I'm going to get us somewhere safe. Mark's fingers tightened weakly around mine. You've been taking care of me my whole life, Elle. Maybe it's time to think about what you want for once. What I wanted. The same question Victor had asked me in his kitchen that morning before everything fell apart. What did I want? Safety? Certainly. A normal life? Maybe. But was that enough anymore? The door to Mark's room opened and a doctor came in, smiling when she saw Mark awake. Good to see you back with us, Mr. Parker, she said, picking up his chart from the end of the bed. How's the pain on a scale of 1 to 10? As she checked Mark's vitals and asked him questions, I stepped into the hallway to give them privacy. The hospital corridor was busy with nurses hurrying between rooms, visitors coming and going, the everyday business of healing and hope, and sometimes grief. I leaned against the wall, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. I closed my eyes for just a moment, and when I opened them again, Victor was standing 10 feet away, watching me. He looked different. Tired, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his usually clean-shaven face. He wore jeans and a simple black sweater rather than his usual perfect suits. He looked almost normal, almost like someone who could fit into my old world instead of pulling me into his. You shouldn't be here, I said, but there was no anger in my voice, just tiredness. I know, he agreed, staying where he was, keeping his distance. But I had to see for myself that you were okay, that your brother was okay. He's awake, I said, glancing back toward Mark's room. The doctor says he'll recover completely. Eventually. Relief washed over Victor's face. Good. That's good. He took a small step forward, then stopped, as if afraid of pushing me too far. Did you get my message? The envelope? I nodded, my hand automatically going to my pocket where the deed still sat. Folded and refolded until the paper was soft. A house in the middle of nowhere. Not nowhere, Victor corrected gently. Just somewhere no one knows to look. Somewhere you could start over. Without you, I said, the words more question than statement. Victor's eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had first caught my attention in the emergency room months ago, held mine. That depends on you, Ellie, on what you want. There it was again. That question. What did I want? The answer had been so simple once: to pay off my debts, to help my brother get clean, to be a good nurse. But nothing was simple anymore. I looked at Victor standing there, waiting for my answer. I thought of Sophia, who had started calling me Mama when she thought I couldn't hear. I thought of the garden where I had begun to feel at home, of the library full of books I had yet to explore, of the strange power in my hands that Victor had never tried to use for himself. Then I thought of Mark, broken and bruised in a hospital bed because of Lebedev's obsession with Victor. I thought of Dr. Wilson's warnings. I thought of the man who had died in the alley behind my apartment. I don't know what I want, I admitted. But I know I can't let my brother get hurt again. I can't let Sophia grow up in a world where violence is normal. And I can't. I took a deep breath. I can't love a man whose life puts everyone around him in danger. Pain flashed across Victor's face, quickly hidden but not quickly enough. I understand, he said, his voice steady despite the hurt in his eyes. That's why I'm offering you the house. A clean break. For both of you. And what about you? I asked. What happens to you and Sophia if I leave? Sophia will miss you terribly, he said simply. As will I. But we'll survive. We always have. The doctor came out of Mark's room then, smiling when she saw me. He's doing well, she said. Much better than we expected. Actually, the internal bleeding has stopped completely, and his ribs are already showing signs of healing. It's quite remarkable. My heart skipped a beat. Healing faster than expected? I looked down at my hands, remembering all the times I had held Mark's hand these past few days, willing my power to work, to heal him as it had healed Sophia and Victor. Had it worked after all? Just slower than before? When can I take him home? I asked, the question taking on new meaning with the deed burning a hole in my pocket. A few more days of observation, the doctor said. Then he'll need care while he recovers fully. Do you have somewhere quiet he can rest? Victor spoke before I could answer. She does, he said, his eyes never leaving my face. Somewhere safe. The doctor looked between us, seeming to sense the tension. Well, that's good then. I'll check back in a few hours. She hurried away, leaving us alone in the corridor. You're really letting us go, I said, wonderment coloring my voice. Just like that. Victor took another step closer, close enough now that I could smell his cologne, could see the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Not just like that, he said softly. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But I won't keep you in a world you don't choose, Ellie. I won't be the reason your brother gets hurt again. I won't be the reason you lose your gift or your goodness or your light. I looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw not the dangerous crime boss or the wealthy businessman, but just a man. A man who loved his daughter fiercely, a man who had lost his wife, too young. A man who had made hard choices to survive in a hard world. A man who was making another hard choice now, for me. Come with us, I said, the words surprising me as much as they seemed to surprise him. Leave this life behind. Start over with me and Mark and Sophia somewhere. No one knows us. Hope flared in Victor's eyes for just a moment before reality extinguished it. You know I can't. Lebedev would never stop looking. And there are others who would take what's mine if I showed weakness. I would only be bringing the danger with me. Deep down, I had known that would be his answer. Known that Viktor Sokolov could no more walk away from his world than I could walk away from my brother or my need to heal. Then I guess this is goodbye, I said. my voice breaking on the last word. Victor reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my cheek gently. "Only if you want it to be," he said. "The house is yours either way. No strings attached. But if you ever decide you want to come back, if you ever decide that what we could have together is worth the risk." He trailed off, his thumb brushing lightly over my skin. "I'll know where to find you," I finished for him. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, made him look younger and lighter than I had ever seen him. "Yes, you will." I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes. For just a moment, I let myself imagine a different world, one where Victor was just a man and I was just a woman, where we had met in some ordinary way and fallen in love without bullets or danger or strange healing powers. But that wasn't our world. That wasn't our story. When I opened my eyes, Victor was watching me with an intensity that took my breath away. "Whatever you decide," he said softly, "know that you've changed me, Ellie Parker. You've healed more than just my daughter." And then he kissed me, a gentle, brief touch of his lips to mine that held both promise and farewell. When he pulled away, I knew what I had to do. For Mark, for Sophia, for Victor, and most of all, for myself. "Give me the keys," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "To the house. I'll go there with Mark when he's ready to leave the hospital. I'll keep him safe while he heals." Victor nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a simple keyring with 2 keys. "The alarm code is Sophia's birthday," he said, as he placed them in my palm. "Everything you need should be there already." Our fingers touched as he handed over the keys, and I felt that familiar warmth flow between us. Not healing this time, but connection, understanding, maybe even love. "This isn't forever," I said, the words both question and promise. "Just until I figure things out. Until Mark is better. Until you're ready," Victor finished. "For whatever comes next." He stepped back then, putting distance between us that felt both necessary and painful. "Goodbye, Ellie," he said, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. "Take care of yourself." As he walked away down the hospital corridor, his shoulders straight despite the weight I knew he carried, I clutched the keys in my hand and whispered words he was already too far away to hear. "This isn't goodbye, Victor. It's just until we find a way to make both our worlds work together." And somehow, looking down at my hands that had healed his daughter, that had begun to heal my brother, I believed there might be a way after all. 6 months passed in the small house by the lake. 6 months of quiet mornings watching mist rise off the water, of afternoons helping Mark regain his strength, of nights sitting on the porch counting stars I had never been able to see in the city. 6 months of healing, not just Mark's body, but my own heart and mind. The house Victor had given us was perfect in every way. It sat on 5 acres of land, with tall pine trees that swayed in the breeze and wildflowers that bloomed in rainbow colors across the meadow. The nearest neighbor was a mile away, the nearest town 15 minutes by car. We were alone but not lonely, isolated but not imprisoned. Mark got better faster than any doctor had predicted. My healing touch had come back stronger than ever, flowing through my hands into his broken bones and bruised organs. By the 3rd month, he was walking the path around the lake without pain. By the 5th, he was splitting firewood for the coming winter and talking about maybe opening a small woodworking shop in town. "You should see the furniture store there, Elle," he said one evening as we sat on the porch swing, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands against the autumn chill. "They sell handmade stuff for crazy prices. I could do better with my eyes closed." I smiled, watching the setting sun paint the lake water gold and pink. "You always were good with your hands." "Unlike you," he teased, nudging my shoulder with his. Remember that birdhouse we tried to build when we were kids? Looked like it had been through a tornado. We laughed together, the sound echoing across the quiet water. It felt good to laugh with my brother again, to see his face healthy and his eyes clear. No drugs clouded his mind now, no pain twisted his features. Here, far from the city and its temptations, far from Lebedev and his men, Mark had found peace. We both had. But in the quiet moments, when Mark was asleep and the house creaked gently around me, I found my thoughts drifting back to Victor, to Sophia, to the garden where we had sat watching stars much dimmer than these. I wondered if Sophia still asked for her angel, if Victor still read poetry in his library, if either of them missed me as much as I missed them. Victor had kept his promise to give us space. No calls, no visits, no men in black suits watching the house from a distance. We were truly on our own, for better or worse. Some days I was grateful for the clean break, for the chance to find myself again without the complications of Victor's world. Other days the silence from him felt like a physical ache in my chest, a space that nothing else could fill. As autumn turned the leaves to flame and then to brown, I found myself checking the mailbox more often, jumping slightly whenever the phone rang. But there was never anything from Victor. Just bills, paid automatically from an account he had set up, catalogs for the local stores, flyers for events in town. Then, on the first truly cold day of winter, when frost rimmed the windows and our breath made small clouds in the morning air, there was a package, plain brown paper, no return address, sitting on the porch when I opened the door to get the newspaper. Inside was a book of Russian poetry, the pages well worn as if read many times. And tucked between the pages, a single pressed rose from the garden and a note in handwriting I would know anywhere. The flowers still bloom. The stars still shine. We still miss you. When you're ready. V. I pressed the note to my chest, feeling my heart beat faster beneath my fingertips. 6 months of silence broken by 8 simple words that said everything that mattered. That evening, after Mark had gone to bed, I sat by the fireplace reading the poems Victor had sent. Though the words were in Russian, English translations filled the margins in his neat handwriting. Stories of love and loss, of separation and reunion, of the kind of longing that spans distance and time. As I read, I felt closer to him than I had in months, as if he sat beside me turning the pages, whispering the words in my ear. The next morning, I woke with a decision clear in my mind. Not a decision born from fear or guilt or obligation, but from understanding who I was and what I wanted. From accepting both the light and dark of Victor's world and of my own. I found Mark in the kitchen making pancakes, his movements easy and fluid, no trace of the pain that had once bent him double. I need to go back, I said without preamble, watching his face for any sign of fear or worry. But Mark just flipped a pancake with expert precision and nodded. I've been wondering when you'd figure that out. Figure what out? I asked, confused by his calm acceptance. Mark turned to face me, spatula in hand, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That you're in love with him. Have been since you first showed up at my rehab center wearing clothes that cost more than my car and trying to pretend everything was normal. Heat rushed to my face. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Mark raised an eyebrow in a perfect imitation of our mother. You love him. From what you've told me, he loves you. Sophia needs you. And you've been staring out that window for 6 months like you're waiting for something. Or someone. I sank into a kitchen chair, the truth of his words washing over me like warm water. But his world is dangerous. Look what happened to you. Mark set a plate of pancakes in front of me, then sat down across the table. Life is dangerous, Elle. Mom died of cancer in a nice, safe hospital. I nearly killed myself with drugs in a nice, safe suburb. At least Victor's dangers are ones he faces head-on. I poked at my pancakes. Not really hungry, despite the sweet smell of maple syrup. What about you? I can't just leave you here alone. Who says I'm staying? Mark grinned, a flash of the boy he had been before drugs and pain had aged him beyond his years. There's a woodworking apprenticeship in town. I applied last week. Got the acceptance letter yesterday. You did? Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged, cutting into his own stack of pancakes. Wanted to make sure it was real first, that I could handle it, that I was really better. And are you? Really better? I asked, studying his face for any sign of the shadows that had haunted him for so long. Mark met my gaze steadily. Thanks to you, yeah. Your magic hands and this place. He gestured at the kitchen, the house, the world beyond the windows. It gave me back myself. And now I'm giving you back to yourself too. The real Ellie, who doesn't run from hard things or complicated people. Who heals them instead. Tears stung my eyes. When had my little brother become so wise? So strong? I'm scared, I admitted, the words barely above a whisper. Good, Mark said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Scared means you're about to do something brave. 3 days later, I stood in Victor's garden as the first snow of winter dusted the dormant rose bushes with white. The mansion looked just as I remembered, grand, imposing, beautiful in a cold and perfect way. But my eyes were drawn to the warm light spilling from the windows, to the smoke curling from the chimneys, to the signs of life and love inside those stone walls. I had called ahead, not wanting to surprise Victor after so long away. Anton had answered, his voice betraying a rare hint of emotion when he recognized mine. He had promised to tell Victor I was coming, but as I stood there in the gathering dusk, no one came out to meet me. No one opened the door or called my name. For a moment, doubt crept in like the cold seeping through my coat. Had I waited too long? Had Victor changed his mind? Had something happened that Anton hadn't told me? Then I heard it. The sound of small feet running across gravel, a child's voice calling out with excitement that warmed the winter air. Sophia appeared from around the side of the house, her hair longer than I remembered, her face flushed with cold and happiness. Ellie, you came back, she cried, flinging herself into my arms with such force I nearly fell backward into the snow. I caught her, lifting her off her feet in a tight hug that squeezed the breath from both of us. She smelled of shampoo and cookies and the special perfume Victor had bought for her birthday. She felt solid and real and so much bigger than she had been 6 months ago. I missed you, little one, I whispered into her hair, feeling that familiar warmth flow from my hands where they touched her back. Not healing this time. She was perfectly healthy, but connection. Love. Papa said you'd come back when you were ready, Sophia said, pulling back to look at my face with solemn eyes so like her father's. He said we had to be patient. And were you? Patient? I asked, setting her back on her feet but keeping hold of her hand. Sophia wrinkled her nose. Not really. I asked about you every day. Every single day, confirmed a deep voice that made my heart leap in my chest. I looked up to see Victor standing a few feet away, snow settling on his dark hair and shoulders. He wore no coat despite the cold, as if he had rushed outside the moment Anton told him I was here. His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had haunted my dreams for 6 months, drank in the sight of me with a hunger that made me shiver. "Hello, Victor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected given the way my heart pounded against my ribs. "Ellie," he replied, my name on his lips sounding like both question and answer. Sophia looked between us, then giggled and pulled her hand from mine. "I'll tell Mrs. Petrova to make hot chocolate," she announced, then dashed back toward the house, leaving Victor and me alone in the quiet garden. For a moment, neither of us moved. 6 months of silence stretched between us like a living thing, full of all the words we hadn't said, all the changes we had gone through apart. Then Victor took a single step forward, closing half the distance between us. "You look well," he said, his eyes moving over my face as if memorizing it anew. "I am well," I said. "Mark, too. He's staying in the house, starting an apprenticeship in town. I'm glad." Another step closer. Now just 2 feet separated us, close enough that I could see the tiny snowflakes caught in his eyelashes, could smell the cologne that was so uniquely him. "And you? Are you staying too?" The question hung in the snowy air between us. Simple words that asked so much more than they seemed. Was I staying at the house? Was I staying away from him? Was I choosing safety over whatever complicated, dangerous, wonderful thing we might have together? I closed the final distance between us, my hand reaching up to brush snow from his cheek. That familiar warmth flowed through my fingers into his skin, and his eyes widened slightly at the sensation. "No," I said softly. "I'm not staying there. I'm coming home." The word home seemed to break something open inside Victor. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against his chest with a desperation that stole my breath. I felt his heart beating fast beneath my cheek, felt the slight tremble in his hands where they pressed against my back. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered into my hair. "I thought I'd done the right thing by letting you go." But it felt like cutting off my own arm. I pulled back just enough to look up at his face. "You did do the right thing. I needed time. Mark needed healing. We both needed space to find ourselves again." "And did you? Find yourself?" Victor's eyes searched mine, looking for the answer to a question he was afraid to ask directly. I smiled, feeling snow melt on my upturned face. I found that I'm someone who heals, who sees both the light and dark in people and chooses to love them anyway, who isn't afraid of complicated worlds or dangerous men, as long as they're the right ones. Victor's hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of my smile. "And am I? The right one?" In answer, I rose on tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss tasted of snowflakes and promises, of the past we had shared and the future we might build. When I pulled away, Victor's eyes were bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Welcome home, Ellie Parker," he said, his voice rough with feeling. As we walked hand in hand toward the warm lights of the house, toward Sophia waiting with hot chocolate, toward the complicated, beautiful life we would build together, I knew that home wasn't a place. It wasn't the city apartment I had left behind, or the lake house Victor had given us, or even this mansion with its gardens and libraries. Home was the feeling of Victor's hand in mine, strong and sure. Home was Sophia's laughter echoing through high ceilings. Home was the knowledge that my strange gift could bring healing to a world that sometimes seemed broken beyond repair. Home was the understanding that love, real love, sees all of a person, the darkness and the light, and chooses them anyway, every day, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when it means crossing thresholds into worlds you never imagined could be yours. As the door closed behind us, shutting out the cold and the snow and the loneliness of the past 6 months, I knew I had made the right choice. Whatever came next, whatever dangers Victor's world held, whatever mysteries my healing hand still contained, we would face them together. And that was all that mattered.